Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to work on a Penn International 965, and we have two things going here. A viewer sent this reel in asking me to do the upgrade to the Carbontex drags, so we'll go ahead and do that. And then as we were just taking a quick look at it, the release button for the free spool is stuck in free spool mode. So that's usually just some grease and grime kind of build up in this reel. So we'll take care of that as we go ahead and do the drag upgrade. So before we get started, a couple of things that I always talk about. One of them is to wear some protective gloving if you can, just because you're never quite sure what kind of chemicals are inside the reels. The second one is to use a parts bucket so that as you remove the pieces and parts from the reel, which we're going to start doing now, that they have a home, so you know where to find them when you go to reassemble. So, and then finally, the last thing, if you don't know the reel that you're working on, I always suggest going out to a website and getting the schematic, which is the burst diagram that will show you how all the pieces and parts come together in the reel, so that you know when you go to reinstall that you have it correct. And in this case, I'm not that familiar with the release mechanism, so I wanted to make sure that I had a good idea before opening up the reel what that was going to look like. So we start by taking off that little nut cap there, and then we can take off the handle nut once we get the right tool. And I keep my tools close by so that I can always have them with arm's length, so that if I'm in the middle of something like pieces and parts going everywhere, that I can reach them without putting the reel down and worrying about where to pick it up again. Alright, so we've taken off the handle, we've taken off the little torsion spring. A little washer behind that, I'm a little bit concerned about that. And then there's no washer in that burst diagram, so that always makes you a little bit concerned. So we'll take this off now. The adjuster knob, there should be two washers underneath that, tension spring washers, which there are. So I don't know why we had that extra washer in there. It doesn't belong there, but that's okay. All right, so we'll then take the case off. So I always suggest as well, in addition to all those other points I gave you earlier, that you take pictures along the way as you are taking a reel apart. That way you know the sequence that you took the reel apart, and you know how to go about taking it and putting it back together again if you get stuck there. So we're going to do a general cleanup on this as well. Again, I'm a little bit concerned because this isn't popping back, so why not go ahead while we're here and make sure that the rest of the reel is in good condition as well. So inside this is pretty clean. I'm just going to go grab a little bit of a cotton swab just to get some of the grease that's dried off. That's fine. There's nothing really in the back of this reel. It's been protected. We're going to use a oil for the bearing in the back. This is a Real-X oil. It's an aftermarket oil. You can use the manufacturer's oil. In this case, there's a Penn Precision oil that's made out on the marketplace, or you can use any other manufacturer's oil. Just make sure that as you do that you are using a oil that's designed for fishing reels, as it'll give you the best and most lasting protection. You know, you can use 3-in-1 oils and some other things, but just be aware that if they're not specifically made for a fishing reel, that they could break down earlier, or in some cases it may be too thick and not be providing you what you need. So just go ahead and do that. I'm going to grab a paper towel now and just wipe off some of the dried grease around the frame. And again, it's nothing terrible in terms of accumulation, and while I have it open, I can also get to the crossbars and reel seat and that and clean that up as well. So we'll go ahead and do that right now, and then I'm going to reinstall the spool to get that out of the way. And whenever you're reinstalling, make sure that the line comes all the way through. You can see I got a little tab stuck here. It's happens all the time. Just make sure you pull that through so that you get the reel to seat properly, and also that when you go to reassemble the reel, that it spins freely. There's also a bearing on the back of the spool, so we want to make sure that we get that done. We'll do that with the oil. And then I'm just going to set that aside in my parts bucket as that piece is ready to go. This is the business end of the reel now. This is what it came in for. It came in for the request to upgrade the drags, and we've also noted that this isn't working. So let's go ahead and take that apart. There's 2 side screws in the plate. Those can be removed, and that'll free up the inner assembly. I'm noticing as I'm doing this, there's a little bit of sand on here too, so it'll be interesting to kind of see what's going on inside there that's stopping that spool from operating properly. Again, those 2 screws can go into my bucket. And then once I have those screws out, the plate has come free, so you want to make sure that you're careful in this. There are two springs in there that you really don't want to shoot and dislodge. And then here's our inside assembly for the International 965. There is an anti-reverse bearing in here. There's a little bit of grease on the back here, so we'll go ahead and take care of that as well. And then we're just going to set that aside, put that in here. I think that what's probably happening here, since all of the pieces and parts seem to be in play here with the springs, is it's probably just got a lot of bit of dried grease in there. So we'll get underneath that and we'll go ahead and service that as well. Okay, we're going to take the main assembly off now. There's a ferrule first that comes off, and then there's the main drive gear which comes off, and that's where we're going to do the upgrades for the drags. Next I'm going to pull the 2 springs that go on to the post that holds the yoke, and then our yoke and our spool gear can come out. And now this is where we can take a look at what's going on here in the thing. It just appears that it's dirty and frozen, and that seems to be the case here. Just dirt and frozen. I'm noticing as I push up and down manually that this works. So I like to just get in there first and foremost and just clean it up. So there's 2 springs on each post. Let's just go ahead and remove those. And I need a little pliers for that. And again, it's a spring, so you have to be careful. If you're not careful with it, it's going to fly off, and then you're going to really have some trouble finding it again. We'll do the one on this side, that frees that up. And then we should be able to pick that up. No, there we go. And then I like to just get this hose down with the general degreaser. In this case, I'm going to use a WD-40 to just clear out the junk in there. Make sure that we get some slip back into this. And while I'm at it, we want to make sure that we can get the trip lever assembly, which is this one. And that seats there. You can see how it's seated. And we have this star behind it, and when that star engages with that little I'm trying to get the star onto the main gear. It's an oblong. I'm just having a little bit of difficulty with this one, getting it lined up. There's a 2-tier inset there. There we go. This takes a little while, and you'll see that this tooth engages here, and as you go to set, you're going to flip, and the flip is going to drive the return key up. And I wanted to get that up because we're going to hit it again and just give that some good penetration there as we go to work on the rest. So we're just going to set that aside, let that work for a moment, and we're going to come over here and do that Carbontex upgrade. So this is upside down at the moment. We're just going to match the washers to it, And these are an aftermarket washer, and a lot of big fans out there. It's like an HT100. It's a smooth drag system. I think the last time I checked, they're comparable in pricing. It's not extraordinarily or that much more expensive to get these. I know I've seen them through smoothdrag.com. I don't know if that's where these came from. That doesn't say. But that's one of the suppliers that are out there. And we just match them up. So that's the best way to do it. So this is the back one. And then we'll make sure we get all the ones from the front. Now these in the front almost look like they are the HT100s, and they also look like they're in very good shape. So I'll return them when I put the reel back, just because there's no sense not providing them with the used pieces and parts. I always like that because it tells the folks that yes, you have done it, right? There's a lot of folks out there that claim that they've done something, and unscrupulous operators, and then they haven't, right? So when I try to service the reels, I try to make sure that all the pieces and parts go back to the folks. That way they know that it's been replaced. Okay, so with these, I do a quick rub-in of some Cal's Universal drag grease. You don't need to use a lot. You can just use enough of it that it keeps it lubricated. The whole idea behind this is to keep the drags flexible. That flexibility is going to provide the drags better wear over time. They don't get brittle. Then here's your last piece. Okay, so the new ones are there, the old ones are out of the way. I think we've probably loosened this up. I'm just going to grab that cotton swab again. This seems to be working fine now. And sometimes patience wins, right? You just want to make sure that you take your time and let the lubricants do their job. Now I just got to grab that spring and make sure I get that back on the post. Sometimes it's easier putting the post first and then loading the spring. We'll try it that way first. And those of you that watch the videos know I have a little bit of trouble with small pieces and parts, so I'm going to do it the other way. I'm going to hold the spring to the assembly and grab a pin, set it on. And I apologize if the video is not very good here. You're probably just seeing my hand at this point, but unfortunately it's the way the angle I need in order to get this in. Okay, there we're on that lever now. Let's sit that down. I'm going to go ahead and do the other one. Same way. So again, the exploded diagram, the whole idea there is to make sure that you can order the pieces and parts by numbers if you need to, but it also shows you the correct way for these to be set in. If you took them off, or if a piece shot out at you during disassembly or whatever, it does show you in a burst format how these things work. And again, I apologize for lack of clarity, but sometimes these springs, that's just the way it goes. Okay, so we have our springs reloaded here. We have this down, and as we trip this lever now, we have the return working properly. So that was the second part of the issue. Just make sure that it's working properly. I see there's still just a little bit of buildup up here, so we're going to go ahead and clean that up as well. Okay, so we're done with that piece. We're going to load the back end washer. Put a little bit of grease on that too. Back end washer goes in first. And that actually sits in the groove on the back of this. Well, there's no groove, but it sits on the back of this one. That should be cleaned out for the reinstall as well. So the washer can go on and sit on the indentation in the main shaft. Then we have the main gear goes on. Then we have the two identical ones go on next. But first, it's round one, eared one, round one. So if you weren't paying attention during the disassembly, that's almost standard in terms of how this works. Going back in with the first of the Carbontex. Now we have the eared washer belongs in the middle. Last of the Carbontex, top one. And we're back for the side plate. We're ready for the side plate. This has been cleared. I'm just going to put a little bit of oil onto this anti-reverse bearing just to keep that nice and fresh. We have our two springs and our yoke assembly go in. Yoke assembly first. And we can put a little bit of blue grease onto the spool gear. Just to make sure that's got some nice lubrication on it. Clean up the junk off of the yoke. That's just some dried grease there that is accumulated. Go ahead and bring that back in. You got to check the spool gear. There's two ways it can go. You want to make sure that the teeth are intersecting with the main gear and that the side that has the indentations on it is the side that goes out. Okay, now we have the ferrule, goes next. Now the ferrule's got a rectangular insert there. It's not round. It sits on the oval or rectangular portion of the main shaft. Our main shaft is set now, so all we need to do is line this up with the keyholes there, making sure that we're set here on the piece. You should hear a snap most of the time, which you just heard. Then we have the two small screws go in that holds the side plate in place. And again, those of you that watch me on a regular basis know me and small pieces don't necessarily go together very well, but we'll get it. There we go, that's the first one. And I like these screwdrivers, by the way. Some people ask me, what kind of tools you like. These are electrician screwdrivers. I believe they're just under 1/4 of an inch. I don't know if it's 3/16 or whatever it is. It fits the Penn Long Beach series side plate screws very well. But I like the rubber. Now, an electrician screw, that little rubber on the handle is meant so that if you're working with a live receptacle or something and you touch a metal part of the box, you get a spark normally. But with the rubber, which is non-conductive, no spark. But I like it because you can see I'm twirling it by holding the rubber part of that. Okay, so the side plate is essentially done now. Before we go any further, we're going to press this down, make sure that we have the release and that it's operating properly, and it's not. So that's why you want to test the head. Is probably something that became dislodged as I was putting the main gear back together. So let's go ahead and make sure that we got that right. And again, it's better to do it now than go through all of that workmanship there, assemble the whole reel back together and find out that you didn't get that little gear reset in there. Easy enough to do. So the Penn International series is usually thought of as the really big reels, but in this case they did make the smaller ones. And this is one of those smaller ones. It's got a lot of fan favorites and follow-ups They do like the reel a lot. I like the reel. I think it was well made, and it's stood the test of time. So I generally like the Penn products. I'm not quite sure why we're not getting the this button to work here, but we're going to take our time and make sure that it works properly. I think it's probably because it's not sitting on the spool and I got this yoke. Let's try that then. We'll put it back together. We'll put it on the spool, and then the yoke won't tip. That's kind of what's happening at the moment here, is it's tipping. Okay, let's go put this back together again. Don't force anything. When you're working on fishing reels, the last thing you want to do is try to become a brute. Strength doesn't win out with mechanical parts. They usually have a tight tolerance, and if you're not careful, if you go to force something, over torque something, what have you, generally what will happen is that you'll break something. Either that or you'll cause something to go out of alignment or out of tolerance, and if that's the case, then you know, everybody's got a problem with that. All right, I'm just going to put this back on the spool. I think that's a little bit of grease on the spool there, and then I think when we put the spool assembly together here, we shouldn't have any problem with the trip lever. There you go, that's what it was. It was the trip lever wasn't working because of the little piece being out of skew there with the yoke. Okay, so we got it tripping. Tighten this up. Tighten the other side up here. Next up was we had these two shim washers. Now this is the way these came out, but these can be rotated. They're not exactly flat. They can be rotated to provide different levels of tension, so that you can find one that's comfortable for you the best in terms of slip. All right, next up is this, which is the Star Jag Adjuster. Give this a quick spin. It's working beautifully. And then it's the tension washer. This tension washer is a little bit out of flat. You don't have to go and order a new one. You can just simply grab your pliers, in this case the needle nose pliers, and just kind of rebend it a little bit. That's just to hold the tension on the handle. Then the handle goes on, and I'm going to eliminate that that washer that doesn't belong there. Again, I don't know why that was there, but it's not part of the diagram, and it looks like a basic hardware store washer, so I'm going to just eliminate that. It doesn't need to be part of the equation here. And then we'll just get this one tightened by hand first, and then we'll come back in and do the last turn or two with that. Don't have the right tool there. Still don't have the right tool there. There it is. So again, the idea of keeping these things close at hand should be good. Nut cap and the holding screw. A little bit of adjustment here. Set that screw into the handle, and there we go. So we'll put a little bit of a drop of oil onto this. We've oiled the back bearing. I'll put a little bit of oil onto your worm gear, and we're in good condition. This one got a new set of Carbontex drags. It's got the free spool releases all fixed now, and it's turning nice and smooth. And we'll just go adjust the drags down to make sure that we have the tension that we need. Oh yeah, we got what we need, so I'll back that off. And there we go. That's how to do the drag upgrade and the basic servicing on the Penn International 965. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope if you have one of these reels, it showed you how to go do that. Again, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. If you liked the video, please indicate that. If you want to see more, please subscribe. And I wish you good fishing. Thanks again for watching.